There was a time when Donald Trump made claims that then President Obama would try to win re-election by going to war with Iran. It never happened. And now some Democrats find the timing of this military activity with Iran by the president suspect, a potential distraction now that he's been impeached. Once again, I brought up the challenges Iran poses earlier this week in a conversation with Illinois Senator Dick Durbin. The Senator, I spoke earlier with one of your counterparts in the Senate, Chuck Grassley, about the appearance the United States is on track for war with Iran. How much does it look like that to you?
I worry about it. I can tell you that when we end up killing a man like Soleimani, we understand, of course, that he is a terrorist, an architect of terrorism with American blood on his hands. But at the same time, he's also a national hero in Iran. And when we terminated him, in the president's words, the reaction in Iran was predictable. I don't know what the next step will be. The raids last night by the Iranians in Iraq fortunately did not take any American lives. I don't know if that's the end of the exchange or it will be escalated beyond. But I think all of us are concerned about the United States getting to the point where we're ready for another invasion in Iran. I personally would oppose that, and I hope that the United States is not contemplating that under this president.
Now, you indicated on Twitter that the escalation of military activity emphasizes the importance of the Congress's responsibility when it comes to declaring war, but Congress has largely avoided that responsibility in recent decades. Why should the American public think that will change now?
Well, it'll change if they demand it, and they should. What we're talking about is not only the possibility of another war in the Middle East, and I might remind those who are viewing this that the last two efforts in the Middle East created the longest wars in the history of the United States, and they're still not over. But the fact as well that it's going to be extremely costly, first in American lives and second in American treasure. Before we commit ourselves to that, there should be no alternative. I think it should be debated so the American people can hear both sides of the issue.
Now, we saw the violence outside the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad, then the U.S. drone attack in Iraq that killed Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. The White House defends it. He was certainly far from a model human being. Why wasn't it okay to kill Soleimani? I
can tell you that the presentation today from the highest levels of the Trump administration, the Secretaries of Defense and State, as well as the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, all made the case that they believe that there was an imminent possibility of attack that would take hundreds of American lives, and that's why they moved when they did. It's hard for us to sit and listen to this without detail and to argue with it. You have to establish their premise as being correct. I'll just say that the next step is the most important question in my mind. What happens next? Is there going to be diplomacy or more confrontation and escalation?
Have you seen those intelligence reports from the Trump administration firsthand?
No. In fact, they've made a point of saying they won't show them to us. They give us summaries of them, and summaries take you only so far. But when it gets down to the details of an actual threat on the United States that was imminent, one that demanded this kind of quick action on January 2nd, they don't provide the detail.
Now, Democrats are quick to blame the president for Iran's growing threat for pulling out of the nuclear agreement. That genie, though, has long been out of the bottle. Sanctions only seem to be poking the bear at this point. What approach do you think can be taken to keep Iran in check?
Well, I can tell you that we, under this president, have tried confrontation for over 3 years. The president walked away from an Iran nuclear agreement that had international inspectors on the ground stopping the Iranians from developing a nuclear weapon. And of course, the president has no alternative to that approach. What he's done is continue to confront the Iranians. It's very clear to me that he is looking for even further confrontation in the future. It's time for the American Congress, as required by the Constitution, to get engaged in this debate. We need to be part of this national conversation. If we're going to ask the families of America to provide the men and women in uniform who are willing to sacrifice their lives for this cause, let's make sure that America believes it's the right cause and the right time.
Now, should U.S. forces pull out of Iraq at the request of that country's parliament that we saw recently? And why or why not?
Isn't that amazing to think that the Iraqis have reached a point they're asking us to leave? 17 years after we've lost 5,000 American lives, spent $1 trillion, engaged so many Americans in this conflict who've come home injured, including my colleague in the United States Senate, that the Iraqis are telling us, go home, we don't want you around here anymore. I don't know that this situation with the president's leadership has really solidified our position in the Middle East. It's more fluid than it's ever been.
Do you think, though, that the United States should abide by Iraq's wishes?
I can tell you that we need to do what's in our best interest. And if it's reached the point where our American forces, who are supposed to be helping the Iraqis, are no longer welcome and are not safe where they are, then we have to think about those forces first and foremost.
Part of my conversation with Senator Dick Durbin. That brings us to our question of the week. How do you think the United States should approach the rising tension with Iran? Send your answer by email to fortherecord@whbf.com or respond to this post on Facebook at the local forum's WHBF TV page or on my page.